everybody? It's here again. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives with me, as always, Cam Hale, and joining me across the table over here, Mr. Kyle the Shakes Filson.
How's it going?
Hope y'all are having a wonderful Monday. Hope y'all had a great week and weekend especially. Kyle, did you have a great weekend or did you just work?
Yeah, I worked most of the weekend, so unfortunately mine wasn't that good. We were supposed to have a baseball game Saturday, but it got rained out, so...
Yeah, we had a little shaky weather, but other than that, it's turned off nice today. It was real nice. Everything's going good so far.
Yeah.
So far?
Yep.
So far. Hope everybody had a wonderful time and everybody stayed safe and had some fun. Maybe y'all had some strange and unusual things happen to you. You might want to email and tell us about. And the reason I bring that up is because we got an email. We get several. I mean, when I say several, I mean a bunch.
Yeah.
We get a lot of emails, a lot of direct messages, a lot of Facebook messages and stuff, and we love them. I mean, you guys are wonderful. But we got this one. And recently, and this is a kick-ass story. I'm going to have to read it to y'all. I got to tell y'all about this. It happened in the Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one.
Okay, around that area. All right, I wouldn't say directly in it, but around that area.
Right.
Summer of 98, summer 99, right in there is what the man that wrote it to us was telling us about it. And basically, they were doing some driving. And a few friends on the back roads down through there, like we all do. Had his top off his Jeep, like in the good weather, in the summer. Of course, it's, if it's anything like it is here in Texas, it's hotter than hell. So
yeah,
I'm sure it is. And he said they something kind of caught his eye because he was thinking that the weather was supposed to be good the whole weekend. They're out running around, and all that. And he said, you see this big storm cloud coming.
Well, and he mentioned they didn't have a top on the Jeep, too. So as you see a storm cloud, you're like, uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, because we've been there. We've been there for sure on that. So he said, kind of started getting concerned about it. And he said that they could notice that the cloud was kind of right at the horizon and it was getting near dark. So I'm going to read you what it was said. So get a load of this here.
Okay.
It says, and this is I love the story. The entire sky was clear except for the area in front of us, which was due west. And it looked like a thundercloud moving in, and it was very dark. I noticed what I thought at first was heat lightning. And that's not uncommon in Kentucky in the summertime, but the cloud looked really rough. Said, I cussed the weatherman under my breath when I noticed something strange. The flashing that I thought was lightning wasn't lightning. I don't know what it was, but I know that it wasn't like anything I've seen before or since. Said this cloud was huge and took up a huge chunk of the horizon. So there was no real way for scale to say for sure, but it was miles across, not feet. I noticed the flashing was in patterns. It began on the left side of the pattern, or on the cloud, moved into the middle, and then to the far right. And it would stay in each position for 30 seconds. He says that I had my watch, and I timed it. And every 90 seconds, the entire pattern would change. The patterns repeated itself in 3 sets. All right? Each pattern was unique to each position. So there were 9 patterns in total, spread across 3 positions. Each location had its own set of 3 linked to the other groups, so there were 27 total separate 30-second patterns. Like grids as it's going across. You follow me so far?
Yeah, I'm following you.
Okay.
It's kind of crazy, though.
It's unbelievable. Well, it's not. This isn't natural at this point. There's
right,
nothing
absolutely.
natural
Not if it's
about
following
this.
an exact time frame,
exactly.
too. I mean, it's patterned.
It says 3 to each location in 3 sets that repeated every 90 seconds. Said we sat for 30 or 45 minutes watching the patterns flashed. Then something stranger happened. I can't imagine anything stranger happening than that, but
No.
Here we go. We noticed lights flying into the cloud from the left and from the right. I timed the lights, and it took about 12 seconds for the lights to come back out the other side, if this gives you any idea of the size.
So whatever's entering this cloud
Took 12 seconds
enters
to come
one
out.
side, comes out the other side 12
Yes.
seconds later.
Yes.
Okay.
Apparently, they passed each other in the cloud, each flying out the other side. They looped slowly towards us. In a few seconds, a third light flew out of the middle of the cloud and joined the other 2 in a standard military V formation, and they flew directly over us. I'm confident that these were military aircraft. They flew off and didn't return. After the airplanes flew through the cloud, the flashes slowed and eventually stopped. The cloud then just cleared out, and you could see the stars behind the cloud. And then, of course, they went on their way. Everything just kind of dissipated and went back to the way it was.
And this listener emailed this this happened in 1998.
98 to 99
in Kentucky.
In Kentucky in the summer.
Boy, what the hell was that?
If there's anybody out there that's ever seen anything like this or knows of anything like this, please get in touch with us. I'm
the
military
military aircraft were flying in and out of this cloud.
He's extremely confident that that's exactly what they were, that they flew in and flew out like they were looking at it.
I wonder if they originated from within that cloud.
I guess.
Is that some kind of crazy time
or a
vortex or something?
Is it something that can create a cloud to where it looks like a cloud?
Well, yeah, you're right.
And it's
like when you see a lot of these,
out of it. Independence Day is the first thing I thought of.
Yeah. There's lots of movies I've seen where all of a sudden there's a cloud and then there's like something in the cloud that's actually a UFO. Independence Day is definitely one of those movies. But anyways, is it something like that, or is it like kind of like the Norway Spiral, where something has created this crazy field? Have you ever seen the Norway Spiral?
Yes.
I'll put links to it. If any of you out there have not ever heard of
it out.
The Norway Spiral, there's a bunch of videos on YouTube, and I'll put some links to it. It is crazy. I don't know what the hell it is.
If it was like a time slip, and maybe that's where they originated from, was that cloud?
Yeah, like that kind of, and then all of a sudden these jets come out of it, and they were like, I don't know, materialized.
Yeah.
They've been gone in time.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe it's one of those ones, and maybe it happens so quick. They don't. You know what I mean? It's like an envelope. Like they hit somewhere, and then 100 miles away, boom, that's where they came out at.
I wonder if the lights were any different colors. Did it say that?
It didn't say that.
It just said that they were patterned and they were light. Man, that is bizarre.
There's no way that's natural.
No,
there's no way.
Especially if it's. He knew that there was 3 sections, right? Didn't he say it's 3 positions, 9 total patterns, and they were changing every 90 seconds. He was keeping time with his
for 45
watch.
minutes.
For 45 minutes. So yes, that's definitely something that's
and it's not like it only happened for like a minute and a half, and you're trying to reflect on that. He had long enough to get his watch. So it doesn't. It didn't go through the first few times you watched it. You're not like, oh, I bet It's like, oh, I think I'll time it. Let's take a look at this now. Let's see.
Well, if it was nowadays too, he probably would have taken a picture with a phone. 1998,
yeah.
They didn't have cameras on phones.
Exactly.
Or I didn't. I had like one of those bullshit Nokias, like the game Snake on there. You remember that?
Yeah. So anyway, man,
that is
who
neat.
you are. Thank you so much for sending that in.
That is cool.
A kick-ass
If anybody
story.
else has any cool stories, please email the show. I enjoy those.
Oh yeah, I love it. And that one blew me away because then I spent the afternoon looking at more stories, trying to find some stuff.
Well, remember what I told you when you first told me that email came in? I'm going to start saving all these, and maybe in a couple of years or
compile
something.
them up.
Compile them all, and make a book out of it or something.
Yeah, because people, it's a
kind of like Jim
wonderful,
Harold's
wonderful
campfire
thing.
stories,
It's a wonderful thing, and but like I said, I looked all over, and there's some strange stuff out there, but there's still no answers to it. There's none at all. I have nothing for it, man. So, Philly, throw us on who we got coming up.
Tonight we have on a guy that works for this. Well, he doesn't work. He volunteers as a part of this group called the Thylacine Research Unit. And his name is Warren Darragh, or he goes by Waz, and he's an Australian fella. And if you don't know what a thylacine is, it's a Tasmanian tiger. And if you want to search it up, it's Thylacine. A Tasmanian tiger is it's an extinct animal, or most people think it's extinct. It looks like a dog with tiger stripes, but it's a marsupial too.
And a huge mouth. It's
crazy, right?
Big,
and we do know that this was a living creature. When was the last one? 1909 or something?
1916, something
like that. They still have videos, old films of the Tasmanian tiger or thylacine.
You can search them up on YouTube, and of course they have, Waz and those guys have a YouTube channel, but they also have old actual footage of the thylacines while they were in a Hobart zoos and stuff like that.
Right. So this is kind of a crypto thing, but it's also something that we know this is a legitimate animal. It once lived. They have proof of it, and so that's the mystery now. Is a lot of people say that the animal's not really extinct. I mean, it's classified by science as being extinct, but there's still people out there that say, hey, every once in a while they see one, or they'll have footprints left, or things like that. So it's pretty intriguing. I mean, why couldn't it exist? We know that, just a little more than 100 years ago, the things were running around. So
the thing I enjoyed the most about talking to Waz, and people, you'll pick up on this in the interview too, is I read a lot about the thylacine before we ever talked to Waz, but it's not like you still don't get the full scope of everything till you talk to someone that's in it. You know what I mean? And I mean,
what was that movie that with Willem Dafoe that was out a couple years ago?
Hunter,
that was cool.
Yeah.
About Thylacine.
But Woz, on air, off air, he was telling us so much stuff that I was like, man, I had no idea it was to that level.
Yeah. And like I said, the group he's with is called TRU, stands for Thylacine Research Unit, and it says that the TRU crew is a committed group of scientists, naturalists, and enthusiasts and specialists from diverse backgrounds. The researchers who comprise the TRU are engaged in field investigations and experiments designed to address various aspects of natural history and the determination of the continued existence of the thylacine. Through the education and experience of its members and the quality of their research, the TRU seeks to be the most credible and respected investigative network involved in the study of the thylacine. It is the policy of the TRU to study the thylacine using technology in ways that will not physically harm them if they still exist. If the thylacine's continued existence is proven, they will seek to protect the species and implement active conservation strategies to ensure that they don't lose the species again. The TRU organizes and reports observations and directs expeditions to places where the observations have occurred. We also strive to investigate and educate all of Tasmania's fauna, but particularly its carnivores. The overall mission of TRU is essentially to resolve the mystery surrounding the thylacine, to derive evidence of the species' continued existence or its extinction. This goal is pursued through the proactive collection of all forms of data and physical evidence from the field, as well as documenting and evaluating sightings, both current and historic. Now, the team's made up of, I'm not sure how many members.
3 that I know of.
Definitely 3, but I mean, I think it has like a section where you can like join.
I'm joining it.
Yeah.
Straight up. I'm talking to Woz. I'm joining it.
Well, Woz is, he himself is an information technology and telecommunications professional who holds a Bachelor of Information Technology degree and a Master of Information Technology research degree.
And a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
That's right. He's
under Anthony Paroche.
That's right. He has 20 years of experience in the implementation of technology solutions, including national and international experience in a wide variety of conditions and climates. He served over a decade in the Australian Regular Army and is a graduate of the Royal Military College Duntroon, Australia's premier military leadership institution. He saw operational service in Cambodia and in the former Yugoslavia. So this guy's a badass.
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much. He doesn't screw around. He's a real straight shooter. And, man, I hope you liked the interview.
We enjoyed doing it. So, yeah, I really hope y'all enjoy it. And we'll talk to you later.
All right, stick around. This is Expanded Perspectives.
All right, guys, we have got a wonderful treat. Tonight we are going to be speaking with Mr. Warren Darragh of the Thylacine Research Unit, and he's out of Tasmania, and this is the man that knows all about what Kyle and I have been talking about a few times, the thylacine. Waz, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm excellent. How are you guys?
We are doing great. We are doing great. You have a little bit nicer weather over there than what we have right now, but...
Absolutely. Blue skies and sunshine here at the moment.
Oh. Well, so we got everybody interested, and we've given them a little teasers about these thylacines and off and on. What brought you, well, before I even ask you what got you involved in it, can you give us a history on it? Can you tell the listeners about what it is in case they don't know? Because a lot of people have no idea unless you say like the Tassie tiger or something like that.
Absolutely. So the thylacine's, I guess, official name is the Thylacinus cynocephalus, which is Greek for a dog-headed pouched one. So it was the largest carnivorous marsupial, so I guess the apex predator within its particular environment. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like a dog or a wolf with stripes in its lower sort of hind quarters, but it's actually a marsupial, so it's more closely related to kangaroos and Tasmanian devils and those kind of animals than it is to a dog or a wolf. And I guess for that reason, it's sort of seen as an extraordinary piece of evolution in terms of that similar sort of hunting and predatory instincts and behaviours has, I guess, delivered through two completely different branches of biological development, animals that actually look very, very similar and have sort of similar sort of head shapes and teeth sort of shapes. But I think the actual sort of history of the thylacine is quite a tragic one, because it was sort of first sort of discovered in the early sort of 1800s as Tasmania, the sort of southernmost state of Australia, and an island about 64,000 square kilometres, about the size of West Virginia, I guess, for all of the north listeners. It was used as a penal colony originally, and the first encounters with this animal were typically convicts escaping prison, going overland. In those days, they thought they could keep walking to China, essentially. So, by way of escape, that they would actually come across these very elusive animals, and they'd see the tiger stripes and sort of be quite sort of fearful and sort of run away and sort of hide. And then after that, when Tasmania was brought in to be basically a primary producer of wool and land-based products, so a lot of sheep were brought into to Tasmania, and in those days it was called Van Diemen's Land, and it was also a number of major primary producing companies, like the Van Diemen's Land Company, was set up and owned hundreds of thousands of acres in Tasmania, and they brought in sheep. And so essentially the odd sheep used to disappear, and the thylacine got the rap for that. But I guess history has proven that wrong, and it was actually wild dogs that were actually brought in by European settlers that were out there actually killing the sheep. And official records say at one stage that more sheep were actually killed allegedly by thylacines than actually existed on the island at the time. So they were often used as a scapegoat for incompetent farming practices. So there were a lot of wealthy landowners that basically petitioned the government at the time in Tasmania to put up a bounty on thylacines to protect the sheep population. And so a £1 bounty was put on each thylacine's head, and that in those days was the equivalent of several months' pay. So the local population went out and started hunting thylacines. So one by one they were brought in and bounties were paid. At the later part of the 19th century, early 20th century, they became quite rare, and we believe that a distemper-like disease also struck them, and that was enough to put them over the edge. And in 1936, the last one died in a Hobart Zoo. So I guess that's the overall story. But since then, since 1936, there's been over 4,000 alleged sightings of these animals in various parts of Australia, which is, I guess, a bit of a mystery in itself, because it's widely believed that the thylacine was widespread across the entire continent of Australia, including the Australian mainland, but that it died out on the mainland probably about 3,000 years ago because it couldn't compete successfully against the dingo, which is the Australian wild dog, and because of that its numbers declined, and Tasmania, being an island state, was a safe refuge for these animals.
So let me get this straight. So if they were on the island of Tasmania, they had died off on the mainland of Australia 3,000 years ago, but now all these sightings are saying they're back on the mainland of Australia. That's
right. So the discussion then becomes is whether they're a remnant population that has successfully hidden itself, or whether somehow they've been reintroduced into the Australian mainland. So, and it's often clouded by things like in Western Australia, which is in the far western side of the continent. Funnily enough, they've found mummified corpses in the bottom of like large caves that have been perfectly preserved, and they look like maybe they've been there for perhaps a year or so. But they carbon date the corpses and they find out no, they've actually been there for 3,000 years. So,
wow.
And there's lots of Aboriginal cave art throughout the whole of Australia that actually depict stripes and whatnot. So that clouds it. But there's also many sightings in the southern parts of Australia, particularly the state of Victoria and South Australia. And some confusing history from the early sort of settlement days that suggest that thylacines may have been around.
Do they still have sightings also in Tasmania?
Yeah, so there's sightings that are recorded pretty much both in Tasmania and in the mainland. Although I guess the skeptics pretty much sort of say that the quality of the sightings on the mainland is equal to the quality of the sightings on the Tasmanian side. So that actually detracts from the overall belief to say, well, if people are saying they're seeing these things on mainland Australia, we think that that's preposterous. Therefore, the ones in Tasmania are probably equally unlikely.
Well, let me ask you this: what got you? Did you ever have a sighting, or what kind of drew you into the whole thylacine, or was it just being around it and growing up around it your whole life over there?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm from Queensland, which is about 2,000 miles and away from Tasmania. So, quite an unlikely story as how I got involved. And in fact, I'm sitting in Queensland now, so I travel to Tasmania several times a year to take part in expeditions and whatnot. But I actually got involved because there's some really quite good thylacine documentaries that are actually out there, and it's quite a compelling and sad story about how mankind has been responsible for the demise of this magnificent creature. So I think that, plus the absolute, soul-enriching environment that's the Tasmanian wilderness, and every opportunity to get out there in the middle of nowhere at the bottom end of the earth was a lure with the mystery and whatnot that was too good to pass up. But I also got involved on a few internet blogs and whatnot where there was a range of individuals involved, and I've got a very good memory for facts and for figures and whatnot, and so people would get on there and sort of say, things about such and such a sighting, and I'd be able to say, well, actually, that's not quite right. And so that then led me to get to know the guys, Cranky Chris Copeland and Wild Bill Flowers, very well known in the Tasmanian devil side of things in Tasmania, and I joined sort of TRU after its sort of first sort of 6 months as the technology expert and an investigator, and we've been going ever since.
So, like most people, it's one of those things that starts off kind of as a little hobby and a passion, then you ended up getting drawn into it.
Yeah, you end up having to explain to the wife why you're spending all of these thousands of dollars on hidden cameras and GoPros and flights to the other end of the country and to look for inverted commas Bigfoot, because I think she thinks that the thylacine and Bigfoot are one and the same. But the other interesting thing is there's a well-known beer in Australia called Cascade, and it's made in a brewery in Tasmania, and it actually has the thylacine on its label. So she points out to me quite regularly, so that's the only thylacine that you'll ever see, so get used to it now. So.
Wives have a unique way of keeping us in check most of the time.
Absolutely.
So is this what you do? I mean, I know you said you was in the, had some military background, all that stuff. Is this all the downtime that you have, you spend dedicated directly to this subject?
Yeah, I guess it's a fair proportion of my time. So basically, my profession is that I'm an IT professional. So up until very recently, I managed quite a large IT department in the electricity industry here. So, and now I'm going off to do some IT project management. But I also have do my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But when I'm not doing that, then I'm doing research and documentary research and talking to witnesses and do other things like updating websites and interacting with people and trying to find out the story and planning new episodes for our YouTube channel that is quite successful and quite popular. So there's not a lot of time for any other hobbies, unfortunately.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, and now hearing your background, I understand why. Y'all have a wonderful website, and the YouTube channel's great. I've watched a bunch of the videos on there. I mean, it's all... And I appreciate the fact that you approach it with an open mind. It's not like you go in there saying that everything you find is every print you find is a thylacine, everything that you have, and every statement that you take is a guaranteed thylacine. You actually go in and just look at the evidence and then weigh it, because even like something that you had said off air was that there's certain times that you get that people say, oh, this is a thylacine track, and he was like, well, 100 years ago I might be able to believe that, but I don't know if I can believe it as easily as I would have then.
Yeah, so that's why a lot of our videos, we have a thing called the skeptometer, and basically it's a score of 1 to 10 as to each of the investigators will sit there and sort of say, based on their knowledge and what they've been presented, do they think that that this is actually evidence of thylacine? So that then sort of can change to say, look, if you were given this piece of evidence when you knew 100% that the thylacine was still around, you'd have a quick look at it and go, yep, that generally matches the characteristics of a thylacine. We know that footprints can change in different sort of substrates, so the balance of probability, so i.e. a 6 out of 10, this would be a thylacine. But now that we strongly suspect that the thylacine has been extinct for 80 years, you've got to start thinking that there are more logical or likely outcomes, and that then sort of points to things like dogs, and I think the other thing too is that to do this kind of research successfully, you have to have a very good understanding of the way that people think and act, and we 100% believe that that people are being honest, and they go out there and they actually think that they see a thylacine. They might see, typically we would say a wild dog or a feral dog. They see it in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of kilometres away, or in a remote place where they don't think that a dog would be, and their mind sort of says, oh, I'm in the middle of Tasmania, I've seen a fawn-coloured dog, it's emaciated, its ribs are sticking out. That then a trick of the light says that that's stripes, it's 10 seconds, it's gone, I saw a Tasmanian tiger. So absolutely, I think that's what happens more often than not. And so the person making that sighting is being honest. I saw a Tasmanian tiger. They're not a liar. They're just mistaken. So you've got to go in there and sort of with that view to sit there and say, well, how do I get as much information from this person as possible to verify this without potentially offending them? And so that's why we use a reporting system that's called the Smith reporting system, and it was developed back in 1979, 1980 by a guy called Steve Smith, who undertook a Tasmanian government-sponsored and World Wildlife sponsored investigation to see whether thylacine was extinct or not. So he basically came up with a way of rating and scoring Tasmanian tiger sightings from very poor to very good, and it was things like how many witnesses, the duration, the description of the animal, the standing of the person in the community, their experience with Tasmanian wildlife, and all of that would then give you a score out of 50. So we use that system as well to actually guide us, because you don't want to be going off and sort of investigating every single sighting when the balance of probabilities is that it's not too good. the inherent problem with that, of course, is that the person may absolutely 100% have actually seen a thylacine, but score quite a low score for a whole heap of reasons. They could be from a small town in Texas on holiday in Tasmania, see a thylacine cross a road, and because of the fact that they saw it for 5 seconds, it starts lowering the score. They're not local to the area. Maybe they only knew it was a thylacine because they saw a tourist information brochure, and so that then starts to erode their credibility, even though they've been very honest and they've actually seen the animal.
I could completely understand that, because I would be the same way if I'd seen something like that and had reported it, but I don't know a very tiny percentage, if anything, of what might be in the woods in Tasmania. There was no way if I saw it I would have no clue, but I'd be like, I think I know what that is.
yeah. So there's plenty of that, and I think we look for collaborating evidence in terms of multiple sightings. And in our videos we have a thing called the 3 H's. So the first H is habitat. Is the habitat actually suitable for thylacines? And a lot of people have an image of these deep, dark rainforests that these animals are living in, so that they can hide. The impenetrable rainforest, people can't get in there, so the thylacines are safe. When the exact opposite is true in terms of thylacines are an apex predator. They like to feed on herbivores. Herbivores are attracted to open grassland type areas so that they can graze. So typically you're going to find thylacines in sclerophyll type forests, so it's relatively sort of open, there's cover, and what they're going to do is they're going to skirt the edges of those kind of thinly to medium sort of thickness woodlands on the outskirts of the open area, and then dart out and then pursue their prey. So that's why it makes sense from that perspective that a lot of people see alleged thylacines near roads and tracks, in particular dirt tracks, because they've been cleared by man. There's grasses on the outskirts. The tree line is usually pretty close to the actual track. The wallabies, the paddy melons, they're out there grazing on the grass that's near the track. The thylacine can get quite close, and away it goes. That and the fact that that animals are generally lazy and take the path of least resistance, and they can walk along the tracks. The second part after habitat is human interaction. So that's the fact that has there been any sightings post 1936 in the area. To have a sighting you need 2 things: thylacine or alleged thylacine and a person, so we can then throw that on a map. And then the last thing is history. And history, have there been any historical bounties paid in that area? So there were quite good records kept of where all of the thylacines are actually captured in the late 19th and early 20th century. So you overlay those 3 things, and that then starts to say, well, is this actually plausible? So if it starts to come from an area where you think, well, there's no habitat, there's no sightings, there's no bounties paid in that area, it starts to look a little bit weaker. The flip side of that coin, of course, is, and then there's theories that, of course, that makes it more plausible because the thylacines are very smart and they've evolved to be away from humans and whatnot. So that's the exact area where they would be. I don't really buy that because not enough time has sort of gone by for them to evolve. And all of the history sort of says that the thylacines were a little bit curious in some ways in terms of would poke their heads out and skirt camps and of people in the bush. So,
well, when you were bringing up the tracks, is there a way to tell if it would be a thylacine track or a regular dog track? Or
I was just going to ask that.
Are they too close? Do you have castings of the ones from the early 1900s and be able to go, look, I've got this exact casting. We know it came from a thylacine, and it really doesn't match.
Yeah, so I guess the answer to that is yes. In fact, there's a really good book that's called Tracks and Scats prints, tracks, and scats of Australian wildlife by a lady called Barbara Triggs, and in that it's got all sorts of photos of basically every animal in Australia. So it has photographic evidence of their scats and their footprints. So it's really quite useful. And interestingly, that book itself leaves the door open that the thylacine is actually out there. But what it's done is, because the thylacine is like a real animal, and the book was written post-extinction, is they've actually used a museum piece to actually create a sample or reference print. So they've got a sand bed, and they've put the print on that sand bed, and it actually shows the outline of the print, and that then becomes the reference piece. So there is a noticeable difference, if you know what you're looking for, between a thylacine and a dog. So in particular, 5 toes on the front foot for a thylacine as opposed to 4. The angle of the toes on a thylacine print tends to face inwards, almost in a slightly pigeon-toed sort of stance. There's a classic X shape that appears in a dog footprint that is more like an arc in a thylacine footprint. There's a number of videos that are on our website where we actually put prints up that have been cast or photos taken, and we do an analysis of them based on those known facts. But there are plenty of casts of alleged thylacine prints, just like there are plenty of casts of alleged Sasquatch prints in North America. I've only seen 1 or 2 that I think what I call sort of eyebrow-raising sort of prints, where you're left with 2 conclusions: either it's a fake or it's a thylacine. And you know, we've got some contacts that are very experienced bushmen, and you know they've sent us prints, and you're left with that same sort of conclusion. So there is that sort of secondary evidence, but the balance of things is that, you know, I've been shown prints that were taken in the mainland Australia that, you know, people swear black and blue that they're thylacine prints, and to me they look like you know, a small wallaby print just happening to hop with its front paws close together, and it makes it look like kind of like a print, but you can usually dismiss those pretty quickly because the thylacine's got a known gait, so you can compare the known gait pattern as well. So the distance between the footprints, you know, so all of these things that, you know, there's some fact there, whilst there's lots of things that aren't known about the thylacine because it was really killed off before it could be studied properly. At least there are still museum specimens and some hand-me-down stories from the people who are out there tracking to sort of compare, as opposed to, you know, what does, you know, Bigfoot's foot really look like.
I guess it makes it nice to, that's kind of what we were talking about, is it makes it really nice to actually have something to go back on as a guaranteed reference, to know that what you're holding in your hand was a cast of a thylacine. So whenever you go out to judge all these castings and these tracks, that you actually have a really good background, instead of just, it's something that we're still not sure if it's out there, like in Bigfoot, we're still not 100% sure it's there.
Or that it's even real.
Or that it's even real, exactly. So we're kind of kicking around that whole idea. Have you yourself, Waz, ever had a sighting or ever had anything that made you instantly go, man, all right, I know I'm on the right track?
Yeah, so I've never had a sighting. I think the closest sort of thing that I've sort of had an experience of was we were out doing some filming of a den site, and there's a video that has us using sort of GoPros and going into these dens and whatnot. And while we were not filming and just at the back of the truck, Cranky Chris, aka the Hobbit of the team, we were having a bit of a laugh, and he did a bit of a Homer Simpson sort of call, and a very loud doe, and almost immediately after it there was like a really loud sort of call, and it was like, and we all just like looked at each other and thought, what the hell was that? And we sort of like filmed the experience, but it doesn't make a very good video because of the fact that there's no context around it. And it was interesting because we described it, and Chris sort of said, it sort of sounded like a really loud wood pigeon. And that evening we actually, in one of the Tasmanian papers, there was an old timer telling a story about how completely, and Chris hadn't seen it at this time, and I read it, and I said, Chris, what did you say that call sounded like? And he said, a loud sort of a wood pigeon. And then I sort of pointed out the words on the newspaper that said, it sounded like a wood pigeon, is what this old timer was reflecting. So, we did a number of follow-up sort of, ran through the bush with our parabolic dish and got nothing else. But so my skeptic mind sort of says, well, it could have been anything. It could have been a dog. It could have been,
a wood pigeon.
Yeah, it could have been a very, very loud wood pigeon with a loudhailer that was mocking us. But it was interesting because we were also in doing a number of vocalization or sound experiments at that time. So the previous night we'd been shooting sounds down a gorge in another part of Tasmania. So, my skeptometer would sort of say, a 1% chance that it was a thylacine, 99% something else. But, it was like, you just sort of wonder. And interestingly, in that same area, we were driving in, and we had an animal run past the front of the vehicle from about 100 metres in front, and we both were like quite sort of surprised, and we stopped the car and went off into the bush, and we both had sort of head-mounted GoPro cameras that were sort of sitting in the back of the car, and we put them on. We then sort of tracked this animal through the bush. We eventually got it to run past us, and we did a whole heap of separate sort of filming of it. But we were, after a while, we were convinced that it was a dog, and the video produced that it was a dog. But it was one of those things where we were in quite a secluded area. You wouldn't expect a dog to be there. It was a fleeting glimpse. We were lucky enough that it stopped and looked at us after we chased it for a while after that. But had that been a fawn-coloured, emaciated dog with its ribs showing, and had we not been relatively experienced in the field, and I've got Chris is a very high caliber zoologist with an immense knowledge of animals, particularly Tasmanian animals. It would have been very easy to leap to a different conclusion. So
that's what I was going to say. Is I guess someone like me, that if I didn't know, I could easily see that I would, after hearing something like that and knowing that history and then seeing that, I could easily be pulled into thinking that that's exactly what I saw.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, we've got birds in Tasmania, sort of lyre birds that are very good mimickers, and there's recordings of these birds mimicking, chainsaw sounds from hearing people chopping trees down, and you think
really,
and so there's all sorts of sort of things that get reported, and so that's why sound experiments have been pretty prevalent in the kind of work that we've been doing. So where we've got some alleged sounds. So there's a lady called Trudy Richards, a well-known thylacine enthusiast and hunter in Tasmania, who recorded what she believed was a thylacine cough type sound. Its bark was alleged to sound like a cough. And so that was on a number of documentaries. So we isolated that and took it out into the field. And interestingly, when we were playing with that, we've all got dogs at home, and the story is that the thylacines absolutely terrified dogs. And my dog's a Kelpie Rottweiler cross, quite a large dog, and he, when I was playing the sound on my machine, was looked quite fearful and Chris's dogs were the same. It was quite an interesting reaction, and there's video of us going out literally in the middle of nowhere, in quite picturesque places where we've hiked hours up steep inclines to get to these remote plateaus and ancient glaciers in Tasmania to play these sounds to wallabies, and you can see them sort of like looking and then, you know, hopping off in sort of apparent distress. The issue with that, of course, is it's an isolated experiment, and, you know, are they hopping off in distress because they've got two ugly people walking towards them, or is it sound? So
it is strange that the dogs reacted that way to it.
Yeah, and interestingly, we've had a number of our sort of Facebook followers and YouTube followers say very much the same thing, that because we've mixed other sounds, because the alleged thylacine sounds are a cough-like bark or high-pitched yips and yaps, very similar to a small terrier, but with just different pitches. So we've played around with terrier-type yips and yaps and tried to adjust them and then play them in the field, and then people have told us that they've played our videos, and with those the dogs have made no reaction at all, but when we've played the cough, they looked quite fearful and wanted to get out of the room. So that's been interesting, and but yeah, there's a whole series of videos. There's even one where the video, the sound sounds a little bit like I think it's a muntjac deer, and there's a few YouTube videos of this muntjac deer coughing, and so we had some of our North American followers sort of say, hey, it sounds like this kind of deer. And there are some deer that have been released in the wild in Tasmania for God knows what reason, for hunting, and because of populations from farms have gotten out. But they're fallow deer, and you know, we can't really get fallow deer sort of sounds to sound the same. But I did an audio-visual analysis and histogram and wave review on the two sounds, on the alleged thylacine sound and the muntjac deer sound, and they appear and sound different. And so the hypothesis was, were they different, or is that just a variation? Does this fallow deer really make that sound? Is it, you know, a male-female variation that we're actually seeing, or is it a thylacine? So, but the important thing isn't just to naturally leap to the fact that no, that's actually a thylacine, but, you know, there's some circumstantial evidence that makes it plausible.
I was going to ask you too. I saw a video online, and I know you'll know exactly which one I'm talking about. And it was a few guys had been on their dirt bikes riding in the outback and found a skull. And the video, now like I said, I don't know. The video made it appear as if this skull was not more than a few years old, and that it was a thylacine skull. Can you elaborate on any of that?
Yeah, so that's it's one of those videos of hot debate. In fact, interestingly, just recently, because we put links and of other types of videos and evidence up on our website from time to time and let people, you know, make their own minds up, some people actually confused us with the people who made that video and thought that we were claiming that this was a thylacine skull and whatnot, when, you know, nothing could have been further from the truth. And I think they were also distracted by the fact in several of our videos we actually have a replica thylacine skull that we use for study purposes and whatnot, and people, I guess, add up 1 and 1 and get 3 sometimes. But this was the controversy over this is that they're a film production company that do motorbike tours and films and documentaries on motorbikes in Tasmania. They're called the Tassie Boys, and they were out and they found this skull. They then took it to one of the museums and was pretty quickly determined that it was a dog skull. But it lingered, and then the discussion was it all just a big publicity stunt for this film company that they were working on, or was it just a legitimate? Oh, we think this is a thylacine. I guess they're the only people that will know. I guess it's good justification in my mind for being sceptical about everything that you see. That YouTube video got several 100,000 hits, and meanwhile, some of the best videos we've put together, some that might get several hundred hits, but 100 times the scientific and research value. That's just the way it is. Not being sensationalising the things that you've got. So.
It pulled me in. I'm glad I got to ask you about it, because I was like, man, I even think I sent it to you, Kyle, and we looked at it and it was like, man, that sounds like that's a lot of, that's some really good information, I don't know why they're not going with it, but now to find out that that's what it was, it makes a lot more sense.
You're right, and all the things I've read and seen online and stuff, I was always questioning, maybe the thing really isn't extinct, maybe they really are there, but now after talking to Woz, he doesn't seem to think that there's any left. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think the balance of probabilities, I think even the most ardent skeptical scientist will say that it is possible that they're out there, and like anything, my confidence sort of goes up and down. You have a few eyebrow raising sort of moments, and the team will have some debates in the background about sort of things, and but the balance of probabilities is that they're gone. There are facts and logic that come to play in terms of that there probably were only about 2,000 to 3,000 of these animals ever in existence in their heyday. To have a sufficiently genetically diverse population of animals, you're looking at 200 plus animals, probably more like 500 animals. And if there were that many out there, you'd probably be actually finding evidence of them. Anyone who's ever been to Tasmania, the density of wildlife is just quite large. So people sort of see lots of roadkill along the roads in Tasmania, and it is sort of quite distressing. But the reason there's so much roadkill is because there is such a high propensity and density of animals there. So, but no one's ever found, or reported to have found, a dead thylacine on the side of the road. Tasmanian devils have had quite a number of shocks to their population bases over the years, and they've been able to stage comebacks over the years. And in fact, some might even say that the comebacks that the Tasmanian devil has had is because there isn't another predator above them that they're competing with. Now, for each one of those steps of logic, there's a counter-argument. So you sit there and say, well, why has no one ever found a thylacine corpse? Well, the Tasmanian devil is a scavenger animal that will literally devour everything, bones. And so that's why, 24 hours in the bush and, that's it. And there's plenty of stories of bushwalkers who have literally disappeared off the face of the planet because their bodies have been, they've fallen over, broken their leg, broken their neck, they've passed away, and then in come the scavengers to tear them apart. Why don't people see these animals is because why aren't they roadkill? Well, they were known to like fresh meat, live prey, not be scavengers. So that's why you don't see them as roadkill. All of the curious ones were the ones that got killed, so that meant that natural selection happened a lot faster, so all the shy ones are the ones that have survived, and they've retreated to other parts of the island. I would say, I sort of see what you're saying, but it's then a big leap, I think, to sort of say, I believe that these things are out there, so I hope that they're out there. But like we frequently say, we're out there in, one of the most spectacularly beautiful parts of the planet, looking for an animal that's believed to be extinct. We're trying to prove ourselves wrong, but life's about the journey and not the destination, right?
That's right. That's right. On your website, you have a map on there of where the sightings have occurred, and I actually saw it looked like 2 of them were up all the way in like Indonesia or Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, so because of I guess the way that plate tectonics works, I guess all the continents were once joined. The thylacine, there's fossil evidence of the thylacine having, or a thylacine-like animal, because there are several types of thylacines even in Australia, and over the thousands of years, the various sort of types have sort of died out until the modern-day thylacine was the only one that was left. But so there's still reports that in the wilds of Irian Jaya in Indonesia that there are thylacines, but that to me, plus mainland sightings, one of the first things I ask when someone says, oh, there's a mainland thylacine sighting, is how big was it? Because Bergman's rule says that the further south you go, the larger the animal. So you can have exactly the same sort of species of animal, but it'll be inherently larger the further south you go. And in Australia, you can see that with things like brush-tail possums. So on the mainland, they're big, but in Tasmania, they're ginormous, right? So you would expect that inherently a remnant population of thylacines on mainland Australia or in Indonesia would be smaller on average than the ones in Tasmania. So as soon as you start to say, well, no, it's in the same size range, or some of them, other reports would say that they're even bigger, that starts to support, conspiracy theories about them being reintroduced. And, there's, you've heard of stories about the Illuminati in the US and all of those kind of things. Well, when it comes to thylacines, there's an alleged secret society called the Thylacine Preservation Society, the TPS, and that allegedly were so concerned about the decline of the thylacine in the late 19th century, early 20th century, that they imported some thylacines into the Australian mainland and let them loose. And it's their descendants that people are actually seeing today, allegedly.
Huh, that's interesting.
That's what I was going to ask you. I'm glad you brought that kind of part up about the whole thing. Is I know over here, and I've even talked about it some, is the fact that people lean on the thing that there could be a conspiracy going on with the logging industry. And I know that over there in Australia and Tasmania, that's a large industry also, and that they could be known, because if it is a known creature that could be possibly on the extinct or on the verge of being extinct, they could shut down hundreds of thousands of acres of forest land and take that money right out of the pockets of the logging industry if it was there. So I'm sure that gets brought up too.
Oh, absolutely, and so there's quite a sizable mining industry in Tasmania as well, and forestry is obviously very big. So we've had people, when we've conducted investigations, we go out to places where there's been sightings and whatnot, and people will jump on the board who live in that area and are basically saying, rack off, we don't want you, in that area looking for these things. And so you get the double-edged conspiracy theory where you say that the environmental group are making up thylacine sightings to stop the logging and the use of the resources in the area. And then the inverse of that, of course, is you then have the environmental group saying that the loggers and the governments that are supporting them are covering it up, so that there is an outrage that the natural resources aren't being sort of prosecuted and whatnot. So I kind of take a little bit more of a pragmatic approach. I guess I can sort of see both sort of sides of the argument. I think that should there be thylacines discovered in an area that's heavily logged, would that shut down the logging area? Well, it may well do, but I think going back to what I said about preferred thylacine habitat is that the logging and the clearing of some of these areas potentially in the medium term attracts the herbivores that are going to come in and graze in those areas as regrowth starts, which would then bring in the thylacines. So you get into that circular argument. The other thing that is quite controversial is the use of the 1080 baits that are there to control all sorts of animals, and the view that using that could somehow impact any thylacine population that might be out there. In fact, the conspiracy theory is that the whole reason they're out there is to kill thylacines so that they're not reported. Again, that's a bit of a stretch as well. I think that the 1080 from my understanding could potentially have an impact on the smaller sort of marsupials, but not so much on an animal the size of a thylacine. That marsupials tend to have a natural resistance to that kind of poison, and given the fact that again that they prefer to have live prey, it makes it a little bit unlikely that you'd actually use that kind of poison to control a thylacine population. So generally, when it comes to conspiracy theories, having worked for a large government organisation for a number of years, I believe that they're not sufficiently competent to actually to hide that kind of secret, and that there's always going to be someone that's going to want to tell. And and from time to time, we do hear of such and such a person who works for a government department who makes a claim, in strictest confidence. So, that always leads to the of some of the sighting reports as well. So.
Now, Waz, I know we had spoken off air, and it was a very unique thing that I hadn't heard of before, and you'd mentioned something about cloning in the background too. What is that going to be about?
Yeah, so for anybody who does any, I guess, casual Google searching of thylacines will know that it's quite frequently listed in the top 10 animals that science believes that it could bring back from extinction through cloning. So there's actually a number of YouTube-type documentaries out there about thylacine cloning. So there's been a number of attempts to bring thylacines back, trying to isolate the DNA from museum samples. So pickled thylacine pups that have been preserved in alcohol, and there's a whole heap of stories that surround that in terms of, some of the claims were more media hype than real. And in fact, at one stage, there was a belief that they're actually isolating or trying to isolate the DNA of some of the bacteria that attached itself to this pickled thylacine pup. But I think there's some immense sort of difficulties associated with it. But science will sort of tell you as cloning techniques and technology improves that the likelihood of the thylacine being brought back through cloning becomes a higher probability. I think there are some people out there, and there's a couple of thylacine researchers who claim to have had first-hand sighting experiences and have written books about it to say that the whole cloning of the thylacine isn't necessary because it's still out there. I would sort of think that it's a pretty good insurance policy, but I think you're going to see the resurrection of the passenger pigeon and the woolly mammoth, I think, before you see the thylacine. But I think thylacine's DNA has been put into a mouse. I think there's been some news on that. And I think that there's also some preemptive work on a gastric brooding frog that's extinct to say, well, look, if we can bring this frog back, well, then we're going to start working on the thylacine as well. But But yeah, so I guess possible, plausible, but still out there, potential science fact from science fiction, I think. So.
And it seems like it's always, whenever you get anything with any type of crypto animal, there's always that underlying or behind-the-scenes tones of those exact things for everything that talk about it.
It almost seems that way.
Yeah. Can you give us some of your, maybe one or two of your favorite stories or favorite researches that you've done when you've gone and interviewed these people?
Yeah, so probably the most recent investigation is probably my favourite. As an ex-military person, I've got an affinity for veterans who were there before me. So we got a couple of cast prints, probably a couple of years ago now, that we did a video analysis on it, and they're called the Tracker Scout footprints, and because the gentleman who cast them was a Vietnam veteran, so an infantryman, number one scout, so the guy that's out the front. I think you guys would sort of say he's the guy who's on point.
Right.
A lot of tracking skills, and a guy that is quite frequently brought in by the police in Tasmania to track criminals or to help to find lost bushwalkers and those kind of things. So quite a knowledgeable person. So he sent us these prints, and we did an analysis, and we basically said, look, these are quite legitimate sort of prints, some of the best that we've seen. So you then sort of start to say, well, what's the context of these prints? Because you never know. Something could have it could be a replica of a print that was cast in 1920. And just reported to taken in modern time. But these prints were allegedly taken in 1990, 91-ish. So I struck up a conversation with him and basically said, "Oh, look, would you like to talk to me about your sort of thylacine sort of experience of taking these tracks?" And as it turned out, he had a number of other experiences that he wanted to tell me about. So I took the 2,000 kilometre trip to speak to him, and interviewed him on a track in the middle of the Tasmanian bush, and quite an interesting experience. I'm basically given a latitude and longitude in the middle of nowhere, and out of the bush after waiting a while comes a guy in sort of hunting regalia carrying a rifle, and that's pretty unusual in Australia. There's a very, very low ownership of weapons in comparison to the US. So you sit there and go, "Oh, here's a guy walking out of the bush with the rifle. Do I run or what?" But he, for the last 30 odd years, had been in feral cat eradication sort of programs. So feral cats, there's more feral cats in Australia than 22 million feral cats, and obviously causing absolute havoc to the native marsupial population. And so he goes out there and traps them, and shoots the ones that need to be shot, takes blood to give to university samples, comes across feral dogs, and that's how he'd had his experiences. And so he relayed a story of when he was a teenager, so this would have been, in the early 60s, about how he was out hunting in a remote part of Tasmania, and some ruffled bushes come out, and he brings the weapon up, and very good practice in terms of identify first, shoot second. He sees that this isn't a wallaby or a kangaroo that he's actually hunting. It's a thylacine, and so he refrains from shooting. The animal goes on its way. Then many years later, back in the late 80s, 89, 90, he's mining a claim that he has for a precious metal that's in one of these particular area. He hears some yips and some yaps that he thinks are a bit interesting, but pays no further attention to it. A week after that, he finds some tracks, and because he's a tracker, he goes, well, this isn't a dog. This actually could be a tiger, and he reports not to be overly interested in tigers. So he decides to follow these tracks for about 1 kilometre, and when he gets there, he finds the corpse of a dead thylacine, fly blown, and takes 3 Polaroid photos of the animal, and then sort of leaves. One of the photos is of its foot, and that's I guess where the conspiracy theories start. And there's been a lot of very recent discussion about my interview online with this chap, because there's another quite well-known and respected thylacine researcher who has a photo of a thylacine foot allegedly taken in 1990 that was reported to have been shot, and that the hunter took a photo of the foot. And so the whole story is our tracker scout fellow the same person, and is it the same thylacine, and so who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth, is it 2 different animals, all of those kind of things. But in the midst of that, the whole argument seems to have been forgotten the fact, well, regardless of whether it's the same animal or not, this thing happened in 1990, 70 years after the animal was believed to be extinct. So there's a whole heap of controversy over that at the moment, and we'll be investigating further on that. But quite an interesting story. So I'd encourage any of your listeners to go and have a look at the interview with myself and Tracker Scout. It's got the advantage of having my roguishly handsome looks on the video, as well as an interesting story of a legitimate Tasmanian bushman. And I'm a little bit cluey in terms of the way that I conduct these investigations too. And I sort of stopped in the town, very small town in Tasmania, and you speak to the locals, and you don't mention the word Tasmanian tiger because you'll be laughed out of town. But you can say, "Oh, I'm here to meet such and such," in the middle of nowhere, and by the reaction that you get from the locals, you'll be able to quickly tell they're standing in the local community. And I walked into a couple of places and said, "Oh, look, I'm here to meet up with an ex-army guy." And before I got the next sentence out, they'd sort of said, "Oh, you're talking to Rusty," which is Tracker Scout's sort of real name, and basically people giving you a character reference of what a stand-up guy this fellow is. So the credibility starts to raise. So here's a guy that's got multiple experiences out there. He also tells stories of hearing sounds and whatnot. And having, had sightings where, driving along the road, he's seen a tiger. He's pulled up a tourist vehicle to say, "Did you sort of see that?" Those kind of things, and they're quite compelling stories, but unfortunately that's what they are, because of the lack of definitive evidence. They're stories, and standout guy, very respected in the community. Do I believe that he's telling the truth? Well, yeah, I think he's telling the truth, but does that then lead to me thinking that the thylacine is still in existence? Well, no, because I need to physically see the evidence for myself to do that. So.
Now, you said that people could listen to that interview. Is that on your website?
Yeah, so we're pretty active in a couple of areas. Our Facebook site, Thylacine Research Unit, is where we post all the links, but most of the stuff goes directly up onto the Thylacine Research Unit channel on YouTube. So encourage people to visit and subscribe. And we also have a comprehensive website, so they all link to each other. So we tend to be more active on the Facebook side of things, and then link back to YouTube.
Okay, and I'll put all that in our show notes so our listeners can follow the links to that.
And what's the name of the website? Is go ahead and give it.
Yeah, so it's Thylacine Research Unit.org.
.org. Boys, we've had a wonderful time. It really hasn't. It's what Kyle and I was talking about. Is we wanted to believe so bad, and we still want to believe so bad because it's something that we ourselves, as man, destroyed these animals. And then, but now talking to you, it's one of those things, and that's what I enjoy about this show so much, is talking to the guys that are more scientific about the approach, the way you go into it and go, look, I'm very skeptical of this whole thing, but I'm still willing to go out there and really dig because I would like it to be true also.
That's right. Woz, I appreciate your scientific approach to it, instead of just, every story you hear is definitely a thylacine, like some shows that we see on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that we like to take a light-hearted approach. So most of our videos have some sort of mayhem or joke to lead in as well, and it's important to do that. And some of the more recent videos, you'll see the guys like Bill, who's also goes by the handle of Snake Artist, handling a few tiger snakes. So that the Tasmanian tiger snake is number 4 on the world's deadliest snake list. So you'll see him pick one of those up, and the in-joke is that I see a Tassie tiger, and he runs off and he picks up a Tassie tiger snake. So you get people excited there. But then there's also another video where we find a blue-tongued lizard, and they're infested with ticks, and so he goes about removing the ticks, and I guess it shows you the broad skill base that the team has to offer. But 2014 is going to be a big year for TRU. We've got lots of quite unique experiments that we're going to conduct in the field. There's a lot more that happens in the background that doesn't make it to film. So expect big things from the group this year.
Absolutely, and keep us informed too. If you ever find anything or just
want to come back on and talk about some of the new stuff you found, we would love to have you come back on and discuss and do this again maybe next year after it's all over with. You tell us what you found over that time.
Yeah, no problem at all.
That would be great. Well, Woz, we don't want to keep you all afternoon. We know you got more work to do, but stay on the line. We'd like to talk to you, of course, whenever we get done with the interview. But thank you again, sir, for coming on, and we're going to make sure we get everybody to go to that. Folks, everybody, please, if you love anything crypto, you got to go to YouTube. You got to watch the videos. It is amazing, the stuff that they do. It's great. And like that, hell, there's so much dangerous shit out there in the grass, man. I don't know if I would jump out and run around out there just looking for that too. So, Woz, thanks, man. You take care.
Thank you.
The future none can see.
And we're back with Expanded Perspectives. What did you think of that?
I loved it. The one thing that, like I was kind of alluding to at the beginning, and you can even tell in the interview, I wanted it to be 100% real. I wanted them to have, I even asked them about this. I wanted it to be
we're not saying that it's
real.
not.
I'm not saying that
I
it's
went
not.
into it thinking there was a lot better chance of it being there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, after talking with Warren, it doesn't really...
Well, there won't...
Seems like the outlook is as good as I thought it would be.
I feel talking to Woz was like when we talked to Antonio Perez. We got a very scientific approach done to it. It's not... And I guess that's kind of what... Without even intending to do it, it's almost what our show has turned into. Is it maybe we don't really interview maybe as much as the full-blown believers as some people. I guess we do in some ways, but without even intending to do it, we interview the guys that are like scientifically approaching a lot of this stuff. And that's what I respect about Woz and his group.
Absolutely.
Because of that. I mean, I was like, because you don't know, anything about it. Like, I thought, because, we both talked to, and
Well, there's more than one thylacine group that we've even contacted
yes,
in the past.
yes.
I mean,
It's
the
the same thing
CRU
with-
was the first group to get back with
Yes.
us. But, you're right. I mean, it just turned out that this seems to be a really good program, and they really approach it scientifically, which is what I
Yes.
appreciate the most.
Well, because there's certain, even in the States, there's certain Bigfoot groups that seem to approach it with a little more zest as far as wanting to say everything is Bigfoot.
Bobo.
Well, sometimes, yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? And it's, you get these certain people
Man,
that,
come on. Every noise you hear in the woods is a Sasquatch
Yeah,
with that guy.
yeah. And I guess that's why, like I said, I respect what those guys, I mean, I respect the guys that approach it extremely scientifically.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it would be easy to jump on that bandwagon and go, oh, yeah, we've got this, we've got that. But then that really doesn't find the real answers. And that's what I really got with talking to Woz and all that stuff. I could talk to him for hours about it, man.
It's pretty cool. I mean, I would like to go on an expedition.
that's
It's
something.
halfway around the world, so I'll probably never get a chance to go over there.
Well, we don't know that. Who knows? With all that money that their people are sending us from where was it all coming from? Nigeria. We've got a princess
I should have
that's
pulled
sending
up
us
some of
stuff.
those. Yes.
I mean, we get folks. We may not be doing this podcast much longer. We probably literally got $800 million promised us.
Yeah,
all we got to
I'm
do
gonna
is
look-
give Kyle. We're going to give Kyle's bank account information to these people, and they're going to send us. They're going to send us.
Yeah,
all
I
this
can't wait.
money.
I can't wait.
It's amazing. So maybe we will. We'll get to go. We'll go around and we'll. If we've got that much money, we're going to give some
I
to
completely
everybody.
forgot about that money there. I forgot about that.
That's all we need. I'm filthy rich, man. I'm filthy rich. I mean, you pull it up. It's everywhere. I mean, I don't even know why we're not doing this. I mean, why are we still? How much is that one for? Hold on, folks.
Hold on, I'm looking. Hold on.
Here we go. He's going to pull one up. But seriously, with this kind of money, people, if everybody gets these spam emails, I do not understand how this stuff even gets through. I don't understand any of it. I don't understand how people could fall for it to start with. But maybe it's not.
Wait a
joke.
minute. You said this is spam? I thought this was legitimate.
I don't know. I've already used.
Okay, check this one out, folks. Okay, this is from a man named Juan Alban, and this is a real short message. It's to me, and it says, I have a project worth $5.2 million to deal with you. If you're interested, email me. That's it.
Wow.
I
Did
mean-
you email him?
No, not yet. I was going to ask you because it says to you.
But that's to the show email.
Yeah, so is it to me or is it to you? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. You've dated some Hispanic girls in the past. It may be one of theirs dad, so it's probably to you.
Uh-oh. Oh, this is a real long one right here.
Who's this from?
This is from Cynthia Kipalaya Cones. I am writing you this mail with tears and sorrow from my heart.
I am writing you this mail.
Yeah. With due respect,
It reminds me of Mysterious Universe's Who Is Phone? Who is Phone? I'm writing you this mail.
I appeal to you. Please exercise a little patience and read through my letter.
Stop right there. Go to the bottom. How much money do we get from her?
Well, there's $8.5 million
Okay.
in a bank in Africa
Okay.
that she needs our help to get out. And if I just give her the information, man, she's going to give it to us.
How much, if you go through all these emails and you add up all the money that they said to get, that's more than the country of Africa has even got in their whole economic system.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm pretty sure you could buy the whole country of Liberia for $8 million.
I thought it's something crazy like that. It really is. This is insane. But so, folks, me and Kyle are apparently filthy rich. We're fixing to upload his, of course. We're going to use his.
Burkina Faso, that's where all these come from.
Where's that at?
Somewhere in Africa.
I wonder how many downloads we got there.
I don't know.
Apparently a lot. They're sending us money. That's the donate. Instead of, folks, if y'all are in Burkina Faso, instead of sending us the emails, there's a donate button on the website. Just go
Yeah.
donate it.
Yeah, that's exactly
We'll
right.
help you out. You donate me the money, and then I'll help invest in whatever you got.
My favorite one on here, and I don't have time to find it right now, is it's like, Dear Sir, I've been trying to track you down for years. Thank God I found you. Somebody in your family left you money. And I'm like, Who are you talking to? This is Expanded Perspectives at yahoo.com.
Yeah.
You've been tracking us down for years. Which person, me or Cam?
Nobody in my family's got money. We all come. It's just a bunch of old ranchers and shit like that, and cowboys. They got no money. Nobody in your family got no money.
No. You ain't gonna get that
Well, did
money.
they knock a bank off in the
Okay,
1900s?
if you were in caretaker of an old woman or something, she's got like, I got $8.5 million. When I die, I want you to track down my great-great-grand nephew in Africa and give it to him. You'll be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I will do it. I swear.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
yeah, put me in charge of it.
yeah, come on.
Psych! I bought this baby cash, hot hands in a dice
If you had
game.
$8.5 million in the sewer of a place, Burkina Faso, I mean, wouldn't you just become like an overlord?
First of all, why do you call it a sewer? We've never been there. Maybe beautiful.
That's true.
Maybe
That's true. I'm sorry. I apologize.
It may be beautiful.
But wouldn't you like build yourself
Then
a
again,
palace,
there
get
may
a
be
bunch of armed
14-year-olds
guards, and have like a bunch of girls and pool and gold? I mean, that's where all the diamonds and stuff come from.
That is true. That's a good
You're going to
argument.
look for an American to give it away to?
Well, he's looking for us.
That's pretty
What better of an American?
Yeah. Insane. Have you been watching what the hell's the name of it? Swamp Beast, whatever.
I'm
What's
not
the name of that
watching
show?
that.
What is that show?
No, the Cryptid?
Cryptid
No.
Swamp Beast.
I'm not watching it.
I only saw one episode.
I'm not watching it.
Why? Why you hate?
I can't, man. If I'm going to watch total, like just fiction, I'll watch like
Wait a minute. I thought it was real.
Yeah, so is Adventure Time too. Thomas the Train's real.
Oh, that's definitely real. Yeah, I watched one episode of it, and it started out the first 10 minutes. I'm like, ooh, this is pretty interesting. What's this going to be about? And then all of a sudden you look and they show some kind of found camera. You're like, man, this is it's a joke.
Speaking of found camera footage, you ready for tomorrow night?
I am so excited for tomorrow night. Yes.
Folks, tomorrow night, me and this character here will be loading up and going with Mr. Craig Woolheater of Cryptomundo and with Mr. Nick Redfern. And
That's
we
right.
are all going down to South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. And we're going to do a little viewing of Eduardo Sanchez's movie Exist. We're going to find out about it. Exists. Yeah, so by the time this all goes down and all that stuff, we'll be back sometime Tuesday.
Yep.
So in the next episode, we'll be definitely letting y'all know
Give
what
you
we
a
thought
full
about it and the whole
review.
thing. If you haven't already if you haven't already seen, Lionsgate Films already picked it up.
Did they really?
It's going to be mass released throughout the United States. Now,
I still
that
wanna
was the
see
prob-
Willow Creek,
That was the
man.
problem that Bobcat had with his, and I heard that they're in some talks.
It's
with
weird
getting it.
because everybody I've ever known that has seen that
You have
movie
to see it.
raves about how awesome it is.
Yes.
So it doesn't make sense that nobody's picking it up. If I get the $8.5 million from Africa, I swear, Bobcat, I'll put your movie into production.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That is a good man. Hit it right there. Yeah,
Boom,
that's what I'm talking
right?
about. Boom, that's it. Perfect. Awesome.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Again, tell your friends, subscribe, listen to the show, visit our website, expandedperspectives.com. You can visit us on Twitter, on Facebook. You can listen to the show anywhere. Also, please rate and review the show on iTunes for us or Stitcher. And I guess
Keep sending those emails.
yeah, if you got any cool stories, send us emails. If you want to be my friend, send me a friend request.
It's not that great being
It's not
Kyle's
that great,
friend.
no.
I'm just going to go and tell you all that up front.
All right, we will go talk to you next
Everybody
week.
have a good week.
Talk to you later. Peace.